From the headquarters of Telesur English in Quito, Ecuador, I'm Carla Gonzalez, and this is From the South. After walking for 22 days and traveling more than 400 kilometers, Campesino marchers arrived in Caracas and held a meeting with Venezuelan President Nicolás Maduro, where they voiced their agrarian sector proposals to the government.
Campesinos marched to draw the government's attention to issues including the insecurity in the agricultural sector, the criminalization of the peasant struggle, localized corruption and land evictions, and topics of vital importance for the sustainability of small and medium-sized agriculture.
Our main goal is to guarantee dignity for our brothers and sisters so that they can hold their head high. With our heads held high, we will continue because we must break the intermediation of food, because we must end the speculation of the food. We are all united in this goal.
The doors of the Miraflores Palace were open to the campesinos. The marchers achieved their immediate objective of holding a public meeting with President Nicolás Maduro. At the meeting, they presented proposals for reforms to state agrarian policies and institutions.
1. To declare in emergency the agri-food sector and to adjust all the actions of the state to guarantee food security. 2. The intervention and restructuring of the Ministry of Agriculture and Land and its affiliated bodies to ensure the development of an agriculture with the participation of the peasant people's power.
During the meeting, President Maduro took immediate measures and ordered the return of land that had been allocated to the campesinos. He also ordered the assessment of cases of criminalization of peasants and the assessment of the legal agrarian system. He scheduled a meeting to address alleged violence against campesinos and other cases brought to Caracas by the various organizations.
If the government does not reach out to the depths of the people has to reach out to their government to channel their mission and their vision and connect this in one action and one force, to connect the deep struggle of all of you with the massive effort that I must carry forward to maintain our country free, independent and sovereign.
The Bolivarian government of Venezuela has been clear in its position that the only way to guarantee food sovereignty is to directly support the men and women who produce it. In order to do this, Maduro has proposed a National Congress of Campesinos to be held in September. It's in this meeting where the national production plan will be defined.
Venezuela's Constituent Assembly has approved a reform of the currency control laws, which will make it easier for individuals and companies to use foreign currency for certain purposes. The reform was requested by the government as part of its efforts to combat currency speculation and boost production in the Venezuelan economy. The reform will come into effect on August 20th, the same day as Venezuela's new currency, the sovereign Bolívar. The former Argentinian President Cristina Fernández has been called to appear in court to testify over alleged bribes. A dozen members of Cristina Fernández's former government were also detained on Wednesday in connection with the same case. Some say this is a new case of judicial persecution against progressive Latin American leaders. The Bolivian President Evo Morales tweeted that this is another attempt by the right to silence our peoples. He recalled the cases of Brazil's Lula and Ecuador's Rafael Correa. Nicaragua rejected the Organization of American States' latest resolution on the country and qualified it as an interventionist maneuver. Following the meeting, Nicaraguan Foreign Minister Denis Moncada spoke with Telesur from Washington.
The Permanent Council of the OAS has had its proposal for a number of months now and has operated in this interventionist manner. The Nicaraguan delegation did not agree with the convoking of this extraordinary session of the Council, nor the agenda of the meeting, and is even less in accordance with the proposed resolution which was discussed by the Permanent Council. In the end, the said resolution was approved. We have clearly established that our government does not recognize that resolution. We reject and condemn it, and we consider it illegal, including all of the procedures that led to it.
Our correspondent Maria Jose Diaz has the details on this story.
On Monday, the government of Nicaragua rejected the creation of a special commission of the OAS Permanent Council, promoted by the United States and its allies in the region. The government denounced the OAS members for making political moves against them, as well as attempting to interfere in their internal affairs. Right now, an extraordinary session from the Permanent Council is meeting in Washington, in which they plan to approve a resolution that will allow the creation of a special commission from 12 countries to come to Nicaragua. On the other hand, the Truth, Justice and Peace Commission announced this Tuesday that the number of deaths from April 18 to July 31st amount to 265 victims, 13 of them children. Meanwhile, the government continued calling for peace and reconciliation.
That was Maria Jose Diaz from Managua. Emerson Mnangagwa of the ruling ZANU-PF party and former ally of Robert Mugabe has won the presidential elections in Zimbabwe. Mnangagwa has won 50.8% of the vote, beating his rival Nelson Chamisa of the Movement for Democratic Change, the MDC, with 44.3% out of the vote. With over 50% of the vote for the 75-year-old Mnangagwa, there will be no runoff. It's the country's first election since the end of the 37-year rule of former President Mugabe. The opposition, however, have rejected the results as fraudulent. Emerson Mnangagwa has said he was humbled as he was elected and thanked the people of Zimbabwe on Twitter. In his message, he stated that it was time for a new beginning and called for peace, unity, and love.
The results that have been announced have not been verified by us. I did not sign those results, so the results are fake.
While some celebrated the victory of Emerson Mnangagwa, the election results have fueled allegations of vote rigging. Security forces were deployed on the streets to prevent protests following violent clashes that killed at least 6 people. Ecuador's Transitory Council of Citizen Participation has removed all 5 members of the country's electoral council. It said the 5 had allowed their political affiliations to interfere with the executions of their duties. Denise Herrera has the details.
The Council of Citizen Participation has appointed new temporary members of Ecuador's National Electoral Council. The decision was not unanimous. Some councillors proposed appointing an administrator until permanent members of the CNE are chosen.
We believe that during these 60 days, the National Electoral Council couldn't be left without someone to lead it and to promote the current electoral process that's underway. The Council is an essential institution for democracy in Ecuador.
4 of the dismissed members rejected the decision of the Council. In a statement, Nubia Villacis, the former president of the Electoral Council, described the actions of the Transitory Council unconstitutional and illegal. However, the new temporary members of the Electoral Council say that one of their duties will be lead the process of selecting the permanent members of the Council of Citizen Participation.
From now on, we are becoming a work team. Once we elect the president of the council, we will release our work project.
The Transitory Council also suspended from his functions of the superintendent of banks. They said he too had exceeded his powers, and they appointed a new temporary authority to oversee the banks.
I promise that the responsibilities appointed to me will respect the Constitution and will aim to supervise the financial system and social safety.
A number of senior public officials have now been dismissed by the temporary members of the Council of Citizen Participation, who were appointed after the government's referendum in February, raising questions about the scope of their authority. By 2019, the members of the Council will be chosen by vote. Denise Herrera, Telesur, Ecuador.
We'll take a short break now, but join us again after a video from our multimedia team. Welcome back. Brazil's ruling party, the Brazilian Democratic Movement, has confirmed former banker and finance minister Enrique Meirelles will be its candidate for October's presidential election. Meirelles is chased by Temer's low popularity rate. Opinion polls give him only 2% of the votes. 72-year-old Meirelles is accused of imposing austerity policies that affected the most vulnerable sectors in Brazil. His party is also surrounded by corruption scandals. And former President Luis Inácio Lula da Silva is currently heading the polls for the upcoming election. Meanwhile, the protest caravan against hunger has arrived in Curitiba, where Lula da Silva is imprisoned. Andre Vieira has been following this caravan and brings us this report.
We are here in Curitiba following the supporters of former President Lula da Silva. The caravan against hunger is already here, and marchers have been organizing different activities since early in the morning, which will take place throughout the day. They have also organized debates with residents to denounce the return of famine to this region. Organizers have reported that since Michel Temer took office, almost 7 million people have been living in extreme poverty in Brazil. They're also denouncing Lula da Silva's imprisonment. Two well-known Brazilian singers will be joining the day's activities. Chico Buarque and Martino da Vila will come to show support for Lula da Silva. Social movements will continue their activities until August 15th, when Lula da Silva will be registered as the presidential candidate for the Workers' Party. We will keep you posted from different regions of Brazil about these mobilizations.
Andre Vieira from Curitiba in Brazil. A report by the National Center for Historical Memory has revealed Colombia's internal conflict has left almost 300,000 fatal victims between 1958 and July this year. 215,000 victims were civilians and 46,813 were fighters. The report also estimates over 80,000 forced disappearances occurred and over 100,000 people were killed by paramilitary groups. Kidnapping, forced disappearance, sexual violence, massacres, recruitment of minors, and terrorist attacks were the most common ways of violence. Miners in Chile's Escondida copper mine striked on Thursday to protest low salary hikes. Miners urged Anglo-Australian company BHP to increase its offer with a double compensation bonus for ending the negotiation. Workers have settled next Monday as a deadline for the company to give an answer. Escondida is the world's biggest copper mine. 5% of the world's copper is produced here. Students in Honduras protested against the increase in prices of public transportation and shared taxis. Demonstrators blocked access to the National Autonomous University of Honduras and placed the country's flag in the main entrance to prevent teachers and administrative staff from entering the building. Students initially sympathized with transporters who demanded a reduction in the price of fuels, but now that transporters are negotiating with the government, students are accusing them of betraying their people.
This doesn't benefit the students. It doesn't benefit the people. I call on the public to come and support us because this is a struggle for the people.
The Peruvian government has predicted the country's economy will grow 4% this year. During a press conference, Peru's Minister of Economy and Finance, Carlos Oliva, explained the country's growth is boosted by international economy, especially by the US, China and Europe. However, Peruvians are urging the government to redistribute this wealth and to end with corruption.
If we want to be a developed country, which is the aspiration that all Peruvians have, at some point we were going to have to confront the corruption scandals and some inefficiencies that there have been in the judicial system.
A Guatemalan judge has ordered former President Otto Pérez Molina back to pretrial detention after the National Forensic Science Institute declared his heart issues could be treated on an outpatient basis. Pérez Molina has been hospitalized for more than 3 months in the Military Medical Center in Guatemala City. Pérez Molina is accused of involvement in several corruption cases, including systematic customs fraud during his administration. Over 2 tons of cocaine were seized in Costa Rica from a low-profile boat, one of the biggest drug confiscations made at sea. The narco submarine was found about 80 miles off the coast, authorities reported. The operation in the Pacific Ocean began after receiving a tip from the U.S. Coast Guard on Wednesday that resulted in the seizing of around 2,000 packets of cocaine, 1 kilogram each. 6.7 tons of drugs have been seized in Costa Rica in the past 10 days.
The amount of drug seizures made over the last 10 days has never happened before in our country. 6.7 tons of cocaine, hydrochloride have been confiscated by different police teams and investigators. Also, so far this year, we have seized 17.8 tons. Our coast, our waters, our land are all being used by drug traffickers.
Bolivia is celebrating the anniversary of the 1953 agrarian reform, which changed the process of land distribution in the country. Our correspondent in La Paz, Freddy Morales, has more.
Today,
Bolivia celebrates the 1953 agrarian reform, which opened the door for the recovery and distribution of agricultural land in the country. Today, the government announced that over the past 12 years, there has been groundbreaking changes. For example, the renovation of land ownership certificates has improved, and now there are over 3 million beneficiaries. The agricultural land surface went from 33,000 hectares to 3 million. And before the reform, women were not allowed to own or buy land. But now, more than 45% certified farmlands are owned by women.
We'll take a short break now, but join us again after a video from our multimedia team.
जो भी रोहिंग्या है, जो भी बांग्लादेशी है, अगर ये लोग इज्जत से भारत देश छोड़ के नहीं जाते हैं तो इन सारे के सारे लोगों को गोली मारकर खत्म करने की आवश्यकता है, तभी हमारा भारत देश सुरक्षित रहेगा।
Thanks for joining us again. The left in Britain was divided over whether to vote for or against leaving the European Union in the referendum 2 years ago. With the Conservative government now in disarray over its Brexit plans, a new debate is opening up on the left over whether to demand a second referendum. Pablo Navarrete reports.
In the referendum held in June 2016, 52.2% voted in favour of the United Kingdom leaving the European Union, the option known as Brexit. Now a debate has opened up in Britain about holding a second referendum.
People in 2016 voted to leave the EU. We respect the result of that referendum. But we are now at a stage where Brexit is no longer a concept. Brexit is a solid object. It's a specific outcome, and it's an outcome which is written by the Conservative Party. And what it is a bonfire of workers' rights. It's an attempt to deregulate the economy. It's potentially the biggest attack on migrants' rights in Britain's recent history.
A recent poll suggests that for the first time since the people voted for Brexit, those supporting a new referendum outweigh those opposed to it by 42% to 40%.
Given the fact that this Brexit is a right-wing Tory Brexit, I think that the left, it should be common sense on the left to say we need to oppose this agenda.
Within the left, there are others who see the positive side that a Brexit could bring to a progressive government.
Brexit does present us with the opportunity to actually move away from a model in which our economy depends on financial inflows from the rest of the world in order to boost consumer debt and prop up real estate prices, and towards an economy in which we actually make things and export things.
It is argued that the economy is key to understanding both why people in Britain voted to leave the EU and the possibilities that Brexit could bring a left-wing government.
There is no way in which the left should be responding to the increase in sentiment against immigration and against foreigners as a good thing. But what we have failed to do is actually look at the other side of that and not just focus upon people's concerns around the social impact of globalization, which are in many ways the most obvious, which people feel much more comfortable and easy expressing. We haven't succeeded in looking at their economic anxieties about the impact of globalization.
Absolutely wrong in
While another recent survey shows that 72% of people in the UK do not trust the ability of Prime Minister Theresa May to reach a good agreement with the European Union, the debate within the British left on the opportunities and challenges of Brexit continues. Pablo Navarrete, Telesur, London.
Bangladesh shut down high schools across the country on Thursday as tens of thousands of students protested for a fifth day after 2 teenagers were killed by a speeding bus last Sunday. In the capital, Dhaka, hundreds of teenage students in their school uniforms have been blocking the city's major intersections. They are demanding that the government makes reforms to road safety. Students allege that Bangladesh's transport sector is corrupt, unregulated, and dangerous. Larger protests are planned for the weekend.
We want the authorities to take action firmly. We don't want any licenseless vehicles on the streets. Unfit people shouldn't get driver's licenses. We don't want underage drivers to drive public transports.
The Hindu holiday of Nag Panchami was celebrated with a procession of villagers parading around 2,000 snakes through Samastipur city, India. The snakes were raised over their heads to prevent evil as they made their way to a temple. The serpents were then worshipped and offered milk, sweets, and flowers in exchange for blessings. Honoring snakes is a significant part of Hindu folklore and mythology. Now let's take a look at some other stories making headlines around the world.
At least 26 people were killed in an airstrike led by the Saudi coalition in the city of Hodeidah. Yemeni government forces backed by the coalition have conducted an offensive to capture Hodeidah from Houthi rebels. The UN Yemen mediator said on Thursday he plans to invite the warring parties to Geneva on September the 6th to discuss a framework for peace talks. The war has killed nearly 10,000 people so far.
These consultations will provide the opportunity for the parties, among other things, to discuss the framework for negotiations, to agree on relevant confidence-building measures and specific plans for moving the process forward.
Mali's presidential election will go to a second round of voting after President Ibrahim Boubacar Keïta failed to win a majority vote. Keïta won 41.4% of the vote, while his biggest rival, Soumaïla Cissé, won 17.8%, according to the released by the government. The runoff elections are scheduled for later this month. Seasonal rains have killed at least 3 people in Vietnam and have left central parts of the capital, Hanoi, submerged underwater. Local media outlets reported that officials may evacuate over 10,000 residents. More than 15,000 houses were destroyed and more than 10,000 hectares of crops were lost.
NASA is preparing to send a probe closer to the sun than any other spacecraft has ventured enduring extreme heat. The probe will pass through the solar corona to study the outermost part of the stellar atmosphere that gives rise to the solar wind. The Parker Solar Probe, a robotic spacecraft the size of a small car, is slated to launch from Cape Canaveral in Florida on August 11 for a 7-year mission. It is set to fly into the sun's corona within 3.8 million miles of the solar surface, 7 times closer than any other spacecraft. And with that, we come to the end of this news brief. But as you know, this and other stories you can find on our website at telesurtv.net/English. And you can also join us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. For Telesur English, I'm Carla Gonzalez. Thank you for watching.
Our actions have an impact on the environment.